Hello and welcome to the channel. This video is so late. I've been kind of busy these past 2 weeks, and honestly, the heat waves we got here in France have been destroying me. My apartment is not made for these record-breaking temperatures, but I finally got everything done for the last part of the Archon Elemental Swap miniseries. If this is the first video of the series you're seeing, I've left a link to the playlist in the description. There is no real order to these, so feel free to finish the video before checking out the rest. It's good for my watch time. Reminder, the final illustrations are all available as prints on my imprint if you'd like to get your hands on them. A huge mega thank you to Error43 HRD for getting a Hydra Venti print. I'm really sorry. It took me 5,000 years to notice your post, but thank you so much. Before we get started, I just want to reiterate there will be no Tsaritsa or Cryo since she hadn't been released while I was working on this series, but we'll talk about all that at the end of the video. Let's start the show with Fontaine is the nation of Hydro and Justice, where Furina takes center stage as the Hydro Archon Focalor, a role she inherited from her predecessor Egeria, or so it seems. People have been very excited for Furina. She got picked for most elements except the actual one I ended up giving her, which was Pyro, making her the God of War. I know the idea probably sounds like a last minute pick because I was out of elements, but actually she was the first to get assigned her element when I first came up with this whole series. Unlike most of the other swaps who were chosen based on lore or vibes, this one is actually based on Fontaine's real life inspiration. Both France and England have a long history of military conflicts and colonial expansions, and they're often found on lists of the nations with the most military victories. Another big reason for that choice was Louis XIV, the longest reigning French monarch, also known as the Sun King. Are ya picking up what I'm putting down? Honestly, the more I thought about it, the more Fontaine as the nation of war felt like it really worked. So much of its technology could very easily be used in battle, especially the Garden X. So with all that in mind, it was time to actually design Pyro Furina. I wanted to keep the Japanese inspiration that Furina's original design has, but rather than Uji fashion, I decided to reference a series that was actually directly inspired by French history, the Rose of Versailles, and its main character, Lady Oscar. Specifically, this outfit from the musical stage play. I did inject a bit of Rococo fashion in there with big puffy sleeves and breeches, a hat with big ostrich feathers, lots of ornaments, all that jazz. I was fairly happy with the overall silhouette, but the colors were a bit more of a challenge. My Lady Oscar reference did end up helping me a ton, and I did lean a lot into it. I liked the more military look of the outfit, so while I first thought about giving her heeled shoes with long socks, I ended up giving her some boots, which fit more with the theme. You'll notice I didn't give her a vision in any of the designs. I wanted to draw pre-Focalor reveal Furina before she was revealed, not to be an Archon. It just felt more fitting for the series. I did draw both a Numa and Usia variant of the design, just to see which one I liked more. I ended up really liking the Numa form, so that's the one I went with. Here's the final design. I added a few more details, giving her 2 different gloves like in her original design, and making sure to have a bunch of sun motifs. With the design done, I moved to the thumbnails. This is when things got a little more complicated. My initial idea was to draw Furina on a stage, both as a reference to her original self and Louis XIV, who was known to have played the sun god Apollo on stage when he was younger. I thought the idea would be kinda cool, and I'd also planned to draw it in perspective. I even got the idea of drawing Focalor in the background, silhouetted in darkness, clapping along with the crowd. But as I worked on the illustration, doubt started creeping in. The perspective was kinda wonky, which honestly was expected, but More importantly, the idea felt really unoriginal. At first, I thought it was because the idea could kind of work with original Furina, but I kind of already accepted that, so clearly that wasn't it. Gne's TCG card is what was up. I completely forgot about his card, and it looked so similar with the perspective, the lighting, even the confetti, and I just could not deal with it, so I just scrapped the whole thing. I am probably gonna keep the idea for a future Furina illustration. With my plans thoroughly squashed, I went back to the thumbnails. I decided to lean less into the theater aspect of Furina's character and more into the showboating. One idea I really liked was her sitting on a cannon, but that felt more like a Navia thing, since she has them in her ultimate. In the end, I just drew her standing tall in front of a lineup of Gardemex to show off the might of her nation. I was really dreading having to draw said Gardemex, so I started with Furina, trying to stick to the TCG style while also not butchering the anatomy. I'm not going to focus too much on describing my process because I want to talk about some lore. Fontaine is a nation with a long history of military might, but ever since the arrival of their newest Archon, they have known a long period of peace. With no wars to fight, the new Pyro Archon set out to focus Fontaine's efforts into building an enduring legacy for their nation, creating machines for show rather than battle. She commissioned plays and later, with the invention of the camera, movies to showcase their nation's greatness. Duels that were once a way to settle scores and verdicts turned into entertainment, becoming more elaborate and theatrical, completely foregoing deadly rounds. But with Fontaine's new pivot, another nation started to focus on their military growth. I could not stop thinking about Fontaine having beef with Nazaria once the Fatui started being a thing. Not only are these guys doing what they used to do, not only are they using the Commedia dell'arte, which is their thing, because Fontaine is also inspired by Italy, but they're also now putting soldiers on Fontainian soil? That's just provocation. I'll admit, the whole beef was mostly a joke, but it also kinda makes sense, right? And here is Pyro Furina. As always, I ended up editing stuff after finishing the art. It wouldn't be an Archon swap illustration if I didn't. I was a little apprehensive about how it would turn out, but I'm actually really happy with the end result. And with all that, let's move to the final Archon swap design. Natlan is the nation of Pyro and War, the only nation whose Archons are humans, passing the torch to their fellow countrymen, with their current Archon being a young woman named Mavuika. So, remember how my first version of Nahida was the Electro Archon before I turned her into the Anemo Archon when I couldn't figure out her design? Well, Mavuika was supposed to be the Anemo Archon. It felt kind of ironic that the Nation of Freedom would be a country where its citizens can't leave its soil. I still want to show my sketches, and even though I didn't really go that far with the designs, they're all inspired by this specific Mavuika concept art, but I'll admit there wasn't much thought put into them back then, so I wasn't all that attached. With Anemo cast aside, it wasn't actually too hard to rework stuff for Electro. Natlan as the Nation of Eternity works surprisingly well. You have the fact that the Archons have all been humans, passing the mantle from person to person throughout centuries, which kind of feels like a never-ending cycle. But honestly, I did not really take into account any sort of lore for this one, mostly because I wasn't sure what to do. With Mavuika's whole design being based on riding a motorcycle, I honestly wasn't sure where to go with her. I tried to look at Natlan NPCs to get my creative juices flowing and was reminded of Fietena's updated design. And I kinda decided to make Mavuika a wrestler. I know we already have Tsaritsa, so it's kind of redundant, but the allure of Luchadora Mavuika was too strong. I sketched up some design trying to keep her silhouette similar to her original design. At some point, I tried to add a Mayan hip cuff and loincloth to her outfit, and while I did like how it looked, it wasn't really the vibe I wanted, so I didn't keep them. I gave her a big belt to imitate wrestling title belts and went for the classic Hoyoverse asymmetrical look. Here's the final fully detailed look. It's fairly simple, all things considered, but I think we've established that I am bad at over-detailing my designs. Pyro Furina was a fluke. Moving to the thumbnail, I decided I wanted another power stance. I did try a more dynamic pose, just in case if I changed my mind. As you can see from the rest of the sketches, I did not change my mind. I wasn't sure if I wanted her to be indoors or outdoors at first, but it became very clear very quickly that outdoors would look a lot more interesting. I used Candace's TCG card as inspiration for the background because I just love the colors. I also used some of Natlan's location support cards to get a general idea of how mountains and clouds were usually drawn. For the lightning, I used Kujusara and the Thundering Manifestations TCG cards. I then chose my ideal thumbnail, which at the time was the daytime version, but that shall change. Whoa, spoilers! Because the thumbnail was a little shorter than the canvas, I decided to follow the general shape and adjust where Mavuika was standing afterwards, showing off a bit more of her legs. While working on the line art, I realized her head was a little too big, so I just made the sketch larger and kept working on the line art. I gave her a bit of muscle definition in her arms and legs. Nothing too crazy. It's mostly implied, but I felt like it was a nice touch for her since she was a wrestler now. For the background, I decided to go with a darker sky, which makes way more sense with the lightning. I'll admit I don't have any lore for this version of Natlan or Mavuika. I really feel like Natlan as is would work pretty well as a Nation of Eternity, with their war against the Abyss being such a long and grueling affair, and basically an eternal fight for the survival of the nation. It kinda just works. While I didn't really think too hard about the lore for Electro Mavuika, I did think about how awesome her kit would be. I like to imagine her fighting style looking closer to what we see her do during her fight with Capitano. And I also really like the idea of her running real fast like Varasa and Yensan and being able to go airborne. Basically everything original Mavuika does with her bike, Electro Mavuika just does it on her own because she's that powerful. Here's Electro Mavuika. Very purple, very bright, exactly my vibe, and I love it. Considering how slumped I was when I started working on her, I'm really happy with what I was able to do. And there we go. All the swapped Archons are done, except for Tsaritsa. I did mention I was going to talk about her. I got a lot of comments wanting her to show up in the series, but since I also kept Cryo out of the whole thing, she had no element to swap with. I was kind of stumped on what I could do because of this, and I got a few suggestions of swapping her with Colombina, making it more of a role swap. At first, I thought that could work, but the more I slept on it, the less confused I was by the idea. So I'm just gonna do another Archon swap video with the Tsaritsa. Just one long video with all 7 designs. No big illustration this time around. I might keep this TCG style, we'll have to see. It won't be for a while, but yeah, I'll be reshuffling everyone's elements. With that all said and done, please let me know your thoughts on these designs. It's always a blast reading what you guys have to say. Like if you liked the video, subscribe if you want to see more, hype the video if you can, I keep forgetting that's a feature, and that is all. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye bye!